So this afternoon what I'd like to do is just to go through some of the sorts of cameras you might have around you at home and look at whether they're going to be any use to do some of the things that you might be doing in astronomy. I think there's basically two types of things you can be doing. One of them is to take photographs of the constellations. Okay, I think this is brilliant. It's probably the easiest one to do, and the lovely thing is it brings out the colours. All the stars come out, all the stars have colours. It's really important they have colours. There's a lot of good astrophysics to be had from the colours, but the human eye just doesn't see colours at all. Okay, in the dark, when the light level is so low that the stars are visible, the colour vision part of your eye just doesn't bother, all right? Because there's so little light to enable you to survive, you just see them black and white. That's why if you wake up in the middle of the night and you look around your bedroom, everything just looks grey or black, doesn't it? Because you just don't see the colours. But even the simplest camera can show you fantastic colours. Here's the constellation of Orion. Orion's belt, you can see the blue supergiant Rigel, you can see the red giant Betelgeuse. With your eyes, you probably won't see that very well, but as I say, with photography, that's definitely something you can see and looks pretty spectacular. Okay? Now, you need to take a photograph like that. You need a camera that you can point at the sky and you can keep the shutter open for quite a few seconds. Okay? Most cameras take a picture like that in a fraction of a second in daylight, and that's the problem. Okay? You need a camera you can put on a tripod, point at the sky, open the shutter, and leave it open for quite a few seconds and then close it to record that kind of thing, okay? Or what you can do is get a camera pointed at the sky and leave the shutter open for a lot of hours. You can leave it open for quite a long time, and then what you get is something like that, okay? Obviously the camera is sitting on the Earth and the Earth is turning, so what happens, the stars aren't going anywhere, but as the Earth turns, you produce what are called trails, okay? So those will produce, obviously, star trails like that. That's what we call the star trail photograph. That is, in fact, a project in itself, because what you can do is you can measure the angle. There's the pole star. You can measure how many degrees, with a protractor. You can measure the angle. You can measure the angle of that one and say, well, this exposure took 4 hours and 25 minutes. So if I divide that into 360 and multiply by 4 hours and 25 minutes, I can estimate the rotation period of the Earth. And that's a really good project to do if you can. It's got everything in it. It's got observation. It's got some numbers. It's got some working out. Really good project to do. All you need is one really good star trail picture like that. Those are the basic two things you can do in astrophotography. You can open the shutter for a few seconds, and certainly with modern digital cameras with their very sensitive sensors, you'd be able to get a picture like the first one that actually looks like a constellation. Okay. Or you can leave the shutter open for a long time. If you happen to see any meteors, they, of course, will appear as like little flashes, little lines across it, so you can do meteor shower that way. Okay, so that's what you're after in astrophotography, and it is nothing like the kind of cameras you might have around you. You might have around you a mobile phone, and many mobile phones nowadays have cameras which are absolutely amazing. The photographs you can take with them are really fantastic. When I was your age, taking photographs of that quality, you'd need really professional equipment, but nowadays you can take super pictures. They're designed to take pictures indoors, outdoors, those sorts of things. Which of these types of things are they designed to do? None of them, all right? When I take a picture with this thing, I get a little flash. How long was the shutter open for? I don't know, 100th of a second maybe, and that's my picture, okay? If you've got a mobile phone that you rather fancy, that's not going to work. The other type of camera you might have is called a compact camera, okay? It might look like this, it might look a little bit smaller. This is quite an advanced one, so you might have one that looks a bit smaller than this. It's a digital camera, you can see. With me, your picture comes up immediately on the screen behind, okay? And you point it at something and you take a picture. There we go, and my picture comes up straight away, all right? How long was the shutter open? Again, not very long, 100,000th of a second maybe. Now, I don't want that. For astronomy, I want the shutter open for at the very least, I don't know, 10, 20 seconds or something like that, possibly longer. Now, if I fiddle around with this one, this is quite an advanced, what we call compact camera. You can tell it's a compact camera because you can't get the lens off. All right, and when you look through the camera, you're actually looking through this top bit, and the sensor, which takes the picture, is looking through that bit. All right, and that's why it's one of the reasons it's called a compact camera. And the main thing is I can fiddle around quite a lot. I can change the modes. I can make it over, underexpose. As I say, this is towards the top end of compact cameras. A lot of them don't have all these widgets on it, but I really can't make it happen. If I point at the night sky, it'll say not enough light. It might fire the flash, which we no use to whatsoever. Am I going to be able to persuade it to keep the shutter open for a few seconds? Not really. I think I can get it up to about half a second or something if I fiddle around with it, and that's just not going to work. Okay, pretty much any kind of compact cameras, and these can be very expensive. You can spend many hundreds of pounds on these for sort of super whizzy ones. It's not going to work. Okay. Now, if we move up the scale, you might have someone in your family maybe who's got one of these. This is called an SLR camera. You can often tell it has the pointy sort of thingy on the top like that. And the reason it's an SLR camera, it's called single lens reflex, is it only has one lens. When you look at the front, there's only one lens, and it's that one. When you look through it, you see the same thing as the lens does, as the sensor does. Okay? That's the reason professional photographers use these, because when you look through, you are seeing through the lens exactly what the sensor, or in olden times the film, would have seen. Okay? You can tell it's an SLR camera because you can take the lens off. Okay? If you want to go and sit behind the goal at Man United and take fantastic pictures, you can clamp on a massive, great sort of telephoto lens, but this type of camera is getting towards the kind of thing that you might want to do. Okay? Now, this type of camera has been around for a long time. Okay? This type of camera has been around for ages. In the olden times, there would have been film in the back. Okay? And you'd put some film in, taking your pictures, take the film out, take it to the chemist to get it developed, and bring it back. This is a more modern one. This is a digital SLR, or DSLR camera, which means when you take a picture, it comes up on the back. Okay, so you can see inside here there's no film, there's a digital sensor. Okay, now this type of camera, again, if I get excited with it and fiddle around with the buttons and widgets, I can actually get it to hold the shutter open for quite a long time. Okay, so this would actually work. So the DSLR camera, you need to be careful. All the camera manufacturers in recent years, my personal view, I think what they've been trying to do is get people who've got these to upgrade to these, because once you buy these, you'll then, what type of lenses do you then have to buy? You have to keep buying lenses for it, okay? So that's why I think they've been trying to do this. They have produced quite a lot of entry-level DSLRs, and if you look at them, they're very automatic. So they'll take lovely pictures and you can put different lenses on, but you haven't got very much control over how long the shutter's open for. So DSLRs is quite a wide range, all right? This is a sort of semi-pro one where you can set it to do 30 seconds or hold the shutter open for a long time or something. But a lot of the more recent, you can get quite recently ones which are a lot cheaper, which don't do that, okay? So do have a look at that if you're looking at one of these, okay? So DSLR, we're getting there. You can clamp this to a tripod. You can set the shutter to stay open. At the moment, it's on automatic, so it takes a picture in about 1,000th of a second because there's plenty of light here. But you can override it into what's called, if you look at the modes, you want what's called manual mode with an M on it, all right? If the camera hasn't got that, you may not be able to do it, okay? But you want a DSLR that has a manual mode. You want a tripod, and then you should be able to find somewhere the important setting that you're after for astrophotography. You basically want what's called the B setting. If you've got a DSLR with manual override, it may well have a B setting. And what happens in the B setting is when you put the button down, when you press the shutter button down, it doesn't just take a picture on its own. When you hold the button down, it stays open for as long as the button's held down. All right? So you could quite easily get this camera to take a 20-second exposure, a 6-hour exposure, something like that. Okay? Going on from that, the next level really, I suppose, DSLR cameras like this one, you can see the difference in the size of the body. Okay? This one has a relatively small sensor inside. All right? The actual sensor is a little one. Nikon call it a DX sensor, whereas this one's an FX sensor. And it means the sensor that actually picks up the light is quite small. It's not actually much bigger than the one inside here. Okay? This one and this one, what's the difference apart from an enormous amount of money? This one has a sensor which is about the same size as old-fashioned camera film. Back in the day of camera film, the most popular format was called 35mm. Okay? And it meant you had a frame size which was 24mm by 36. Okay, that was called 35mm film. In the days of film, it was tremendously famous and fabulous. Modern DSLR cameras like this one, the sensor inside is much smaller. All right, it's a good deal smaller than that size. This one has a sensor inside. I can't show you obviously, but you can see the body is physically much bigger. The body inside here, sorry, the sensor inside here is the same size as an old-fashioned camera 35mm camera frame. Okay, what difference does that make? It takes bigger, sharper pictures. If you're taking photos with this that are going to become posters by the side of a motorway, then you obviously want that because you're going to blow it up quite a lot. Most everyday photographers really don't need that, and that's why there's a big price difference between what Nikon call a DX format, which is the small sensor, and the FX, which is the large sensor. Can have a different set of labels for it, but it's the same idea. Okay, you're unlikely to have one of these at home unless you've got someone who's very keen on photography. A new one of these is about £5,500. All right, so it's not the sort of thing you like to have around. If you've got parents who are a photographer or an uncle who's a photographer or something, you might have, but this should be okay for what you're trying to do. Okay. The other big advantage of FX sensors is they're much more sensitive to light. In low light situations, these work much better. Okay. Now, in terms of astrophotography, it doesn't make a lot of difference really. If you're going to hold the shutter open for 6 hours, the fact this has got a more sensitive sensor doesn't make a lot of difference, really. If you're a press photographer to take pictures of the Prime Minister coming out of a dimly lit back street or something like that, being able to take really sharp pictures when there's very little light is really, really useful. And that's why if you watch the news and you see, you know, David Cameron talking or something, the press are all sort of in front of him, aren't they, doing this, and they hold it up, don't they, above their heads and do, you know, do that kind of thing. You can see that's why it would be a useful sort of thing. Don't go out and buy one of these for Christmas. All right. Any kind of DSLR will probably do. The large format ones, the big sensor ones, not going to make a lot of difference, I don't think. The only advantage of this one for astrophotography is it's weather sealed. Now, it's not perfectly weather sealed, but I've taken photos. I've stood out in the rain with this thing for ages and ages. It's been through snow. It's never missed anything. Okay. This one, I wouldn't quite be so sure. This is designed to be used by professionals, and for that reason, it is extremely resistant to being left outside in the damp air, okay? If your dad's got one of these, he's not going to want you to clamp it outside in the wet garden for 6 hours, okay? So do be careful, but if you've got even an ordinary DSLR, and you can tell because the lens comes off like that, and it's got manual override and the B setting, then you probably can clamp it to a tripod and get it to take 20-second exposures or 6-hour exposures, depending on which type of project you're after. Okay? However, there's a way of short-circuiting the whole thing. If I was in your position, I would do film photography. When I was your age, this was the equivalent of this. The sort of pro SLR camera, this was it. Okay? When it came out, this was quite a sort of groundbreaking camera. When this came out, I remember looking at one of these. It cost the same as a motorbike, but half the cost of a decent car or something. Very, very expensive. And you can see by the fact it's survived. This is about the same age as me. Looks much better, actually. These you can buy. I bought this for 50 quid. Now, that's quite a lot because it's a Nikon. Nikon are a bit like Ferrari in Formula One. Their development of the SLR is the development of the SLR. So I would advise you not to buy Nikon because most Nikons of this era are quite collectible. All right, this little FM2 in very nice condition is worth a lot more than 50 quid, I would say, to a collector. Canon, slightly less collectible, all right. Other manufacturers, again, you don't really want a Nikon because you're paying for the fact it's quite a collectible camera, okay. Now, this is quite different. This hasn't got a digital sensor, okay. Remember how to get the back off. If you open it up, there is no digital sensor, all right. There's a space here. You put a little canister of film in there, you pull the plastic film across, wind it onto there, close the back, wind it on, and when you take a picture, you're actually taking it onto a little piece of plastic film, and you wind it through, and when you've taken 36, you wind it back in, take it to the chemist, and they develop it for you, okay? This is very old technology, and the instant digital cameras came out, the instant digital sensors were invented, I can remember these cameras just became worthless overnight, practically. Some of the big camera shops in the high street would give you 10 quid for your old film camera when you upgraded to a digital one. But as I say, this has gone from costing as much as a small car, and now, because it's film photography, obviously it's not quite so popular, okay? So there are some really good film cameras available on the internet, on eBay and stuff like that, for next to no money because they're not digital. Who wants a film camera nowadays, okay? And when I see them on there, I just think, oh, I remember when that came out. It was the top of the line, it cost thousands and thousands of pounds, and now they're nothing. This is a box that will move the film on and will keep the shutter open for a long period, and they're just perfect. The thing I love about this one, it has got a battery in the bottom. That's just to run the light meter. When I look through here, it's completely manual. I have to focus it manually, and I have to adjust the aperture to get the right exposure. There's a little arrow in the corner that tells me if I'm going to over or underexpose the picture. I have to do that manually, and then I take the picture. Okay. Once I've taken the picture, I have to advance the film. So you can tell your grandchildren, your teacher at school had a camera where you could wind the film on. You don't see that very often. Okay. And so this sort of thing would be perfect. If you take the battery out, there is then no electronics in here. That's what the M stands for in FM2, is, again, designed for professionals. If the battery fails, you're a bit limited in what you can do and you lose the light meter. You can still, if you listen to that, that's cogwheels and bed springs. There is nothing electronic there, okay? This type of camera is perfect. If you go outside, it gets a bit damp. There's nothing to go wrong. In here, you've got more processing power than most spacecraft. And you get damp inside one of them, that is the end of the camera, all right? They're probably not repairable. So before you take your dad's £5,000 DSLR outside, just bear that in mind. These are perfect because they're utterly mechanical, okay? Be careful buying something nearly as old as me. I mean, you wouldn't want to, would you? You need to be careful. Some of them, it's difficult over the internet because what you need to do is actually feel what the spring's like, all right? You need to be careful. Does it still work? If the light meter doesn't work anymore, it doesn't matter. You don't want the light meter to tell you what the shutter speed should be. You want to say, right, open for 20 seconds, open for 6 hours, something like that, okay? So you don't need to worry about that kind of thing. As long as it's in mechanical good order, it's light proof, you can put the film inside. You can still buy film like this from Boots in the High Street. They'll still sell you those little canisters of film. You put it inside, you click away, and this is perfect for that kind of thing, all right? On eBay, I've seen them down to 10 quid. Probably not Nikon's and probably not as nice as that, but down to that sort of thing. You'll need to buy yourself one of these things. So when you press the shutter, you follow, you can lock it down, go and watch telly for 6 hours, come back, release the shutter. You with me? And there's your picture. All right. This has a B setting. You can see it written around there, which means, listen, if I take a photograph, that's the shutter open. Okay. I don't have to stand here for 6 hours. If I use the little plunger thing, I can lock it for 6 hours. Do you follow? So I can go away and watch telly, come back and then unlock it, and you get the idea, okay? Be a bit careful though. I said these digital SLRs often have that feature. This has got a B setting, but if you put this in your back garden, you put it on the B setting, you press the shutter down, put a piece of sticky tape over it and leave it, what will happen after about an hour and a half is the battery will go flat. And then the shutter will close automatically. When you're taking a digital picture, the sensor has to have electricity, all right? If you take this one out in the back garden, set it on B, pointed at the sky, open the shutter, and just lock it open, the shutter will stay open for a couple of hours probably, but then the battery will go flat and the shutter will close, all right? You can buy an extra battery pack for this that costs an absolute fortune, which will allow you to do a 6-hour exposure. But an exposure with a digital SLR, you've got the problem is you're running the battery down all the time. Outside it's cold, which means the batteries don't work as well. Unless you've got a professional sort of standard camera, you might find it difficult to do those really long 6-hour exposures. 20-second exposures to take your constellation pictures, or 2 minutes or something, absolutely fine, okay? If you're doing star trail photography, I really would do this. All right, if you told me tomorrow I've got to have a star trail picture or something, I wouldn't use this because keeping the shutter open for that amount of time, the batteries in here are really, really good and they cost about £150 each. But even then, I wouldn't put money on it lasting more than a couple of hours. They're just not designed to stay open for that long. And you're running it down all the time. Something like this would be much better. So my top tip would be to go on the internet and look for some kind of ancient film camera, 35mm film camera, something like this. Nikon are great, but often if they're in good nick like this one, they're quite collectible, okay? Be careful. In the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, autofocus was invented. This one looks very similar, and you might look at that and think, well, that's quite good. It's definitely a film camera, look. You can see it's a film camera, okay? Problem is, it's autofocus, which means it's got lots of electronics here. The minute you see one of these panels, this one doesn't work anymore, so I can't turn it on. But the minute you see the LCD panel, most electronics in the 90s probably doesn't work anymore. You don't need it. This is electronics to do auto exposure and run the meter and do the autofocus and so forth, and that's just not needed whatsoever. You actually want an older totally the more mechanical it is, the less electronics. There's more likelihood that it still works. None of the electronics inside here works anymore. And secondly, you're going to be leaving outside in the damp for 6 hours, or in the case of constellation photography for a couple of minutes, and the less electronics, the better. Okay? Right. I hope that made a bit of sense and gives you some idea. You may now think, I'm not going to bother. More people end up wasting time with photography than others. I know you might have cameras at home. Cameras, they're so fantastic. I can't believe mobile phones, you can take fantastic pictures in seconds. You haven't got to wait for the picture to develop, anything like that. They're brilliant. But for astrophotography, loads of stuff you don't want. You don't want autofocus. You don't want super fast titanium shutters and things like that. You just want a box that will hold the film, lock the shutter open, and close it 6 hours later, or close it 2 minutes later. Okay?